It's The Real News. I'm Aaron Mate. After a string of losses, Democrats are rebranding. They recently unveiled their plan to win back voters. It's called A Better Deal.
President Trump campaigned on a populist platform, talking to working people. That's why he won. But as soon as he got into office, he abandoned them, making alliance with the powerful, special interest, Koch brother-dominated hard right wing of the Republican Party, which appeals to the very wealthy, not the working people, leaving a vacuum on economic issues. We Democrats are going to fill that vacuum. Democrats will show the country we are the party on the side of working people.
The new Democratic agenda calls for increased oversight of corporations and cracking down on monopolies, a jobs program through infrastructure spending and tax credits, a sweeping plan to lower the cost of prescription drugs, and a $15 minimum wage. All of these are apparent nods to the Bernie Sanders wing of the party. But the plan does not include what many progressives see as a litmus test for the next election: single-payer health care. This absence has helped fuel the ongoing debate inside the left over the Democratic Party's future. I'm joined now by two guests. David Dayen is a contributor to The Intercept and The Nation and a weekly columnist for The New Republic. And Steve Phillips is the founder of the group Democracy in Color. He's also a columnist for The Nation, a senior fellow at the Center for American Progress, and the author of Brown is the New White: How the Demographic Revolution Has Created a New American Majority. Welcome to you both. Steve Phillips, I'll start with you. Your assessment of the Democrats' plan, A Better Deal.
Well, it's inadequate, and most importantly, it's misdirected. And so some of the core components, she was outlined in Schumer's op-ed piece around higher wages, lower expenses, retraining. That's all fine. But the premise of it is what is the problem. And the premise is that there are all of these voters who were formerly Democratic or who were drawn to the Democrats, who defected to Trump because of Trump's populist economic appeal, and that Democrats have to work to actually try to recapture those voters, and that's the way of going to get back power. And even in that clip, Schumer is saying that that's why he won, because of his economic populist appeal. That's not why he won. The most important reason why he won is actually that African-American voters did not vote at the same rate that they voted in 2012. And many progressive whites defected to third and fourth parties. That's the most important. The reason, and that's linked to that, or secondarily, is that the people who did gravitate to Trump, many of them were responding to his inflaming of racial resentment in this country. And so rather than draw a line in the sand, speak out against that, summon people to their highest and best selves to actually embrace a multiracial country that we have, the Democrats are putting their head in the sand and ignoring that and simply trying to go after this economic message, which is both mathematically unfounded as well as morally delinquent in terms of speaking up to the outrages and the attacks on the various communities of color and other marginalized groups in the society that this administration is doing.
Steve, I guess my only question there is your analysis setting up a sort of zero-sum binary where why does it have to be mutually exclusive? I mean, why wouldn't a populist economic message appeal to both types of voters that you're talking about? You know, white voters, working-class voters who voted for Trump, and also people of color and progressives who did not vote for Democrats?
Well, because the presumption is that you people are trying to disentangle the intersection of that he may have said a few populist things with he said a whole bunch of racist and misogynistic and xenophobic things. And so we're hoping by ignoring those other pieces that then people will gravitate towards us. Trump did not rise in the polls until he demonized Mexicans. And he further rose in the polls when he said he was going to ban all Muslims. So the people who did support him gravitated towards him on that front. The more important point is the mathematical point, is that the underpinning that Hillary got 3 million more voters than Trump did. And even in the 3 states that were critical to losing, he did not get the majority of vote. there was a bigger increase for Jill Stein voters than there was the margin of difference in Michigan and in Wisconsin. So it's not that it's a zero sum. It's not that we should not be. I mean, the most economically disadvantaged people in the country are people of color. And so there should be a social justice, economic equality message that deals with the racial wealth gap in this country and then the overall economic problems that we face. But we're not going, my problem is the premise of all of these efforts is targeting a group which is not, there is no evidentiary basis that we will be able to actually get back. And meanwhile, we're ignoring the groups that we actually need to win. There's been no discussion, no big panels or conferences or initiatives dealing with increasing Black and Latino voter turnout, but there's all this drama around the white working class. And so we're squandering precious resources and time, and that's the strategic fallacy of the current situation.
That lack of effort put into recruiting people of color, enlisting them in politics, why do you think that is?
Well, I mean, the flip answer is 400 years of racism and white superiority in the country, which is not that flip. And so I actually wrote a piece for The Nation right after the election about the need to diversify the leadership of the Democratic Party and the progressive movement. And I highlighted in that how every organization, every single organization had a budget of over $30 million on the Democratic and progressive side of the $1.8 billion that was spent was run by a white person. So it's not a malicious thing necessarily. It's just people relate to who they know. People like them. They know people who are like them. And so you have to expand the composition of who is in leadership. So then you have a different set of understandings and priorities and inclination. So they keep putting in place white people who know white people, and then they think that the most important people to go get are white people, regardless of what the actual underlying data shows. But they have not given checkbook power historically to people who both come from, understand the communities of color.
David Dayen, you've written about a better deal, and you've covered, in general, the dynamics of progressive politics. What's your take on this new Democratic plan?
Well, I think I had lower expectations going in than Steve might have had. I really don't expect the Democratic Party from the top down to craft a message, given past history, that speaks to the broad community of people and what they're feeling. However, I do believe that the biggest problem that we face right now as a country is this dominant corporate power that we've seen through all sectors of the economy, and how that translates into both the concentration of economic and political power and the soaring inequality that we see. And I was pleasantly surprised that from a policy standpoint, if not from a political standpoint, that the Better Deal policy, Better Deal agenda really put that at the center of their argument. And I think that would be terrific for policy if we return to what we did in the 1930s on up through the 1950s and 1960s, which was attack levels of concentration, give people the economic liberty to actually display and use their talents against dominant economic forces, against dominant corporations. And I just think that would be better for all regions of the country, Black, white, Latino, whatever, to have these situations where it isn't the Walmart or the Amazon or the Facebook or the Google that is securing all the profits. We've seen the top 1% capture virtually all the gains post-recession. And I think that this focus, which is really specific and direct in the Better Deal agenda, they're talking about moving away from the standard that if a merger or a combination of ownership helps consumers and helps efficiency gains and helps allegedly with consumer prices, if the companies can make that argument, then we should allow that merger to occur. They're talking about moving completely away from that and moving towards the idea of anti-competitive behavior being at the top, and that concentrations of power are by their very nature distorting to society. And this filters down through virtually every sector and every part of American life that you can actually imagine. So I was pretty pleased with that aspect of it. It's an agenda that I believe is being rolled out, and I don't think it's complete in any way. And I'm not sure what the political implications are. I'm looking at it purely on policy, and on policy, this really is a throwback to the kinds of economic democracy that we used to see throughout the New Deal that really lifted communities across the country.
Yeah, there's a headline today in the Washington Post that says, centrist Democrats begin pushing back against Bernie Sanders' liberal wing. And it talks about a group called New Democracy, which is now voicing criticism of those Sanders-esque elements of the Better Deal platform. In terms of the Democratic Civil War, what do you expect to be happening now? And actually, if you could comment on that in the context of this recent controversy over Senator Kamala Harris, which is some opposition to her or some criticism of her has sparked some infighting amongst leftists in recent weeks. And part of it was based actually on a piece that you wrote not too long ago about her.
Yeah, so I wrote this story, which was really about the Treasury Secretary nominee, Steven Mnuchin, and his bank, One West Bank, which foreclosed on tens of thousands of Americans, a disproportionately people of color, actually. And in California, I obtained this memo that showed that there was widespread misconduct and violations of California state foreclosure laws that One West was engaged in, and the state attorney's general office wanted to file a civil enforcement action against One West Bank for that, and this would have had, obviously damage to the reputation of Steve Mnuchin. I'm not sure that if his bank was indicted and convicted of all these crimes, that he would have been able to become Treasury Secretary. Kamala Harris was the Attorney General in California when she decided not to bring forward that case. And a lot of people on the left have brought up this in the context of Harris not, being maybe too close to Wall Street, too close to her donors. Steven Mnuchin was a donor of Kamala Harris, so was One West Bank. There were other investors in One West Bank, like George Soros, showing that this attempt to put Harris at the forefront of maybe a 2020 presidential run is misguided. Personally, I think that's 3 years away. And I would be more interested in putting issues at the head of the agenda and forcing whether it's Kamala Harris or Bernie Sanders or anybody to, come to the people who are calling out for these different policies, whether they be free college tuition for all, whether they be single-payer health care, whether they be a skeptical eye towards the growing financialization and corporate concentration that we see across our economy, whether it be criminal justice.
Let me go to Steve Phillips. Steve Phillips, your thoughts on this unfolding debate that continues past the 2016 primary, now between centrists and progressives of the Democratic Party. The debate as you're seeing it now unfold.
Yeah, well, I think that's only part of the debate, first of all. And so too often, to be frank, the discussion is what do the white centrists of the Democrats think and what do the white progressives think? Whereas 47% of the Democratic voters are people of color. The Democrats have not won a presidential election in the past 20 years without an African-American, without a person of color on the ticket. And yet decided to go with an all-white ticket in 2016. So first of all, I think the debate is too narrow. And second of all, I think when one just looks at the issue around this, centrist versus progressive, there's a danger of a level of purity that is, we'll just generously call it unintentionally discriminatory on race and gender. And so there's at least a dozen or more people being talked about and looking at running for president. So what is all of this focus on Kamala Harris? And then another article about Kamala Harris, Deval Patrick, and Cory Booker, the three African Americans, which is notable. But more importantly, it's out of perspective and unbalanced. Every person, you can find something to criticize about everybody. But if you're going to talk about something Kamala Harris did not do around the bank, you also have to talk about how she fostered a $25 billion foreclosure settlement from a lot of the different big banks as well. So you have to look at people in their perspective. But the most fundamental underlying piece is what is being done to inspire, galvanize, organize the full constituency that actually elected Obama. And so some of it is, yes, to be more progressive, yes, to go after the top 1%, but how to do that, and to do that in a race-conscious way and not a colorblind way. Even the New Deal was actually had fundamentally racist components of it, where they excluded field workers, and they excluded domestic workers, so largely Latinos and African Americans, consciously, because the South demanded that actually take place. So we need to have a robust, populist, transformative, progressive agenda, but it also has to explicitly champion bringing about justice and equality and eliminating the racial wealth gap, as well as the gender wealth and pay gap.
Can I just respond to that quickly?
Sure, David, yeah.
That $25 billion settlement it was a joke. I wrote a whole book about this. The majority of money that, first of all, there's only $3 billion in hard dollars. The rest was credits. And the majority of that money, at least in California, went towards short sale forgiveness, which the IRS said was valueless to the consumer. So the majority of that policy was more transactions in the national mortgage settlement actually removed people from their homes than actually left them in their homes to, and aided them with a modification of their mortgage. The financial crisis was what one former congressman called an extinction event for the Black and Latino middle class. It was the largest destruction of wealth for people of color in modern history in this country. And you cannot divorce these issues. These issues are intersectional. When you're talking about economic inequality, you're talking about racial inequality. When you're talking about the overweening power of the financial sector to be predatory upon their customers, you're talking about them being predatory upon Black and brown people. And I just don't think that you can separate these issues out at all. And if people want to make the argument that Senator Harris dropped the ball on getting some accountability for this overweening corporate power and this financial power and this predatory element that we saw with the banks perpetrating in 2008, then I think that's a completely legitimate thing to say, and something that affects people of color distinctly.
Right. So on this point of not separating these two issues, I want to go to a clip of Jennifer Palmieri and then get your response, Steve Phillips. She was speaking to MSNBC a few months ago, and she appeared to make a pretty clear binary, a pretty clear distinction between, identity politics and a progressive economic message. This is what she said.
I think that a lot of this energy is not, the base is there, but you are wrong to look at these crowds and think that means everyone wants $15 an hour.
Don't assume this is a policy
Don't assume
push.
Don't assume that the answer to big crowds is moving policy to the left. I think the answer to the big crowds is engaging as much as you can to be as supportive as you can and understanding. I mean, what these people want, they are desperate. It's all about identity on our side now. They want to show, He does not support me. I support you, refugee. I support you, immigrant in my neighborhood. I want to defend you. Women who are rejecting Nordstrom's and Neiman Marcus are saying this is power for them. Donald Trump doesn't take me seriously. Well, like, I'm showing you my value and my power. And I think it's like our own version of identity politics on the left that's more empowering. And I think that's a safer place to be.
So that's Jennifer Palmieri. She served as the communications director for the Clinton campaign. Steve Phillips, your thoughts on this approach? I mean, do you agree with what she's saying here, making this distinction between identity politics and moving to the left?
No, I think that that's what the challenge the Democrats have is they do not know how to talk about and participate in an election and in a political debate within which race is central, which is really, frankly, every debate since the 1619 in this country. And so they chose to ignore these issues rather than to talk about how they are integrated and how they should be woven together. And the reason they choose to ignore it is because they are fearful of alienating this mythical white working class swing voter who's going to gravitate towards them if they just talk about more better trade deals. They have to put forward an economically populist and a inclusive agenda that is embracing the full diversity of who this country is now. There was a recent piece by a professor out, I think it's in the New York Times recently, talking about Trump is championing the policies of white racial resentment. And so that's why he's going after immigrants, why he's going after Muslims, why he's going after affirmative action. So you have to articulate those issues, and those are communities which are actually the most economically distressed, and talk about a progressive populist platform. And I talk in my book about a tax on the top 1%. If you tax a wealth tax, not an income tax, if you instituted a wealth tax on the top 1% in this country of just 2% a year, that would end poverty in this country. But we don't have that level of bold, audacious thinking, partly because the Democrats are too afraid of alienating their donors as well. But they cannot do it in a colorblind fashion. And I would argue that that was ultimately the failure of Bernie Sanders' campaign and why he did not generate the kind of support among the communities of color they would have needed to win the nomination, is because it was too colorblind, which then does not address and validate the driving realities that are part of the exclusions by group which are happening in this country right now.
So, Steve, let me ask you, do you think it's a fair critique of centrist Democrats, so-called centrist Democrats, like Jennifer Palmieri, to say that they're using the identity politics issue, the race issue, as a way to deflect, as a way to avoid taking on progressive economic platforms that could reach a wide range of voters?
I don't know. I mean, I've met Jennifer. I don't know her well, and I don't know the motivation around it. I don't. Let me more just say I actually don't know. I mean, I guess one could argue that, but it's not it's not a grouping which has championed an agenda, and the Democrats have historically not championed an agenda which both targets the 1% as well as fully and enthusiastically, unapologetically embraces the communities that Donald Trump is unapologetically demonizing right now.
So if you could design the strategy for 2018 and 2020, what would you prescribe?
So the most important thing is to understand the underlying math of the matter. And so that's what I've been really so focused on, is that there's this obsession which plays into Trump's hands, that what we have to do is calibrate our message and then our resources and our targeting to the, I would argue, mythical Trump Democrat, the Obama-Trump voter. Whereas the real way to win is to re-inspire and re-mobilize the Obama coalition. And that's key for taking back the House in 2018, and that's winning back the presidency in 2020. And that means directly standing up to the things that Trump is attacking and saying, that's not the country we believe in. is that we're not here for this immigration attacks. We're not here for this demonizing of Muslims. We're not here for the attacks on affirmative action. We believe in a country that has all of these different types of people, all of these languages, all of these colors, and that's the strength of this country. And we're going to build this country on that diversity, and we're not going to back away from it. And we are going to push for a more equal society that it deals with the economic inequality as well. All of that tied into a vision. And that's what's also left out is Trump has handed the country over to the billionaires, a bunch of his cabinet members, all of his public policies. But there's this reluctance to defend the things that he is attacking. And that's what has to be done forthrightly in terms of message. And that's also what has to be done in terms of the allocation of resources. Democrats are going to spend $700 million in the next, between now and 2018. What constituencies is that targeting? Who are we trying to mobilize? We have enough numbers if we will inspire, organize, and mobilize them to actually take back power in this country.
Right, and that $700 million comes after, Steve, as you pointed out in your piece for the New York Times, that $1 billion was spent in 2016. David Dayen, contributor to The Intercept and The Nation, a weekly columnist for The New Republic, and Steve Phillips, founder of the group Democracy in Color, a columnist for The Nation, a senior fellow at the Center for American Progress, also an attorney, and the author of Brown is the New White, How the Demographic Revolution has Created a New American Majority. Thanks to you both.
Thank
you.
And thank you for joining us on The Real News.